we're going to be talking about the different genres of crime writing that these two writers have produced great works in, and we're going to give you a chance to ask them some questions as well towards the end of the session. First of all, I'm going to ask ladies first. I'm going to ask Megan Abbott to come up on the stage, and I'll introduce Megan. Megan Abbott, please. Megan's written a number of books. Her latest book, The End of Everything, is out, but we're going to talk about some of her earlier books today, really, which are very much in that Los Angeles noir, hardcore noir tradition of Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and so on. And our other writer today, who doesn't really need an introduction because, he's sold more books almost than anyone else, I think, really. The king of that Scandinavian crime tradition at the moment. The Harry Hole series just seems to have the world captivated now. But please welcome to the stage Joe Nesbo. Thank you. And Joe has done, he'll probably correct me, I think now 9 Harry Hole books.
That's right.
9 Harry Hole books. The Phantom is the latest one that's out here this year, and you will know, I'm sure, Harry Hole and his many personal problems that he has to deal with as we move on. So I want to get kicking off. I want to know what I know what traditions in crime writing, what genres I think you write in, but what do you think you're writing in, which could be completely different? I mean, Megan, I mean, I see you as just that noir LA style. Is that what you think you're doing?
I think so. I was a big movie lover as a kid, and I loved film noir, and I loved gangster movies, and really my writing sort of stemmed from a desire to walk into one of those movies. I remember the first one for me was Public Enemy with James Cagney, and I watched that as a kid over and over again, and I wanted to be in that, and later more traditional film noir like The Big Sleep, and I came at it more from the movies at first, and I sort of wanted to push my way into that, and then later came to very influenced by Raymond Chandler and James M. Cain and Hammett, and the sort of beauty of it is there weren't too many primary female characters, so my sort of way in was that I could sort of enter the tradition would be to have a female character at the center, which was just sort of like my way to sort of bust into a house that was not mine.
And it's very much an alive tradition. It's not just you. There's quite a lot of people writing in this tradition, in this style.
Absolutely, right? And I think there's something really eternal about noir. The sort of elements. We're always going to have lust, desire, greed, envy. Those things don't go away. For better or for worse, we always feel them. So I think that's why it persists, perhaps.
Yeah. I should say I'm going to get into trouble for not having also mentioned that we're live on ABC Digital and Online. That's the second thing I've said in English that I don't really understand. Joe, noir, as Megan writes it, has certain conventions in terms of the structure of the writing, the sort of plots. We know it very, very well. You write in a different tradition. I would probably throw out the word hard-boiled. I mean, would you accept that? How do you see what you do?
I would say you're probably right. I mean, I'm a Scandinavian writer, so I guess when I first started getting translated, people expected it to be this sort of Scandinavian crime, which I'm not exactly sure what it is. But I was labeled Scandinavian, but myself, I wasn't really influenced by any Scandinavian crime writers when I started writing, simply because I hadn't read them. But I had read some American crime fiction. I had read a lot more American fiction that was not crime. But there was one writer, Jim Thompson, who wrote in the 50s and 60s, and he was sort of a favorite of mine. It was just a great writer. I saw it was called once a dime store Dostoevsky, and I think that's pretty precise. And he probably wrote some of his novels, like The Killer Inside Me. For me, that is like Bret Easton Ellis' American Psycho, just written in the 50s, and it's just great writing. And he's definitely what you would call a hard-boiled writer. So yeah, I'm happy to be labeled, in the same genre as he is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, before the Scandinavians took over the entire world of crime writing and basically left nothing for the rest of us. I mean, the Scots did very well in crime writing, what they called the tartan noir sort of style. I mean, when I think of, and also with the Scots, there was a lot of drinking because that works as well. I mean, did you read much of that? Did you read any of the Scots?
No, not really. I have, just like Megan, I'm probably more influenced by movies than by crime fiction in books. I think although we have probably read more than the average person from a young age on, we have still probably seen more movies than we have read books. So I think I'm probably more influenced by Martin Scorsese than by Raymond Chandler. I'm probably more influenced by Bob Dylan and Tom Waits than by Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett.
Well, Tom Waits is very noir, isn't he?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I hope you brought pens because you're going to get a great reading list and a video list here. Megan, I mean, LA noir film. I mean, you watched all those films? You've seen all that?
Yeah, sort of devotedly. There was just something about them. As a child, they seemed very glamorous. I don't. Sometimes now they seem so harsh and bleak. I can't imagine what kind of child I was. But they seemed very dramatic, and everything mattered a great deal. And I think sort of the heightened quality of them, and the men were really hard bitten, and the women were really two-faced, and there was just something about it that felt, I guess, very primal and spoke to me in some way. And then I too, Scorsese was a big influence on me, and I found Thompson through Scorsese, made the Grifters, produced the Grifters, and that's how I found him. So I think something about crime fiction and film. There's a sort of constant cycle between them, and I think they perhaps more than other genres, the two feed each other.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at Dashiell and Hammett and also Jim Thompson, they wrote for Hollywood.
Right.
They wrote scripts and also the books. They were probably, especially Jim Thompson. I think he hoped that every book he wrote would be adapted into a blockbuster Hollywood movie. It never did when he was living, but that was like what he aspired to. And I think that the way they wrote books, that would suit a 2-hour-long movie. Yeah. I think we can see that in today's crime writing also. It's not like crime writers, at least not all of them, are writing a book in order to have it made into a movie. But you can see that structure in the crime novel that I think is very much influenced by movies.
And I think with Thompson and Chandler and everything, there's a rhythm to the writing that lends itself to the screen and to actors. And don't forget, most of those films were directed by refugee from Germany who came out of that German expressionist tradition as well, which was very dark, shadows and everything.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of humor in the dialogue too, and it's contrasted with this very extreme imagery often. I think there's something about that that's dynamic.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I want to ask you both as well, because from slightly different angles, is, Megan, you have these wonderful female characters who are outside of normal society. I mean, they're living on the edge. Harry Hole, of course, lives in his own universe that he's created in his pit of despair. I mean, one of the things I'm always, when you look back at all crime writing, really, I mean, even going back to the sort of soft genres of Christie and people like that, there is always this idea. I'm never quite sure whether or not the maverick is essential to the story. Is it really that, in order for the story to get told, the policeman, or if it's not a policeman, the private eye, whatever the character is, has to be a maverick, has to be outside of mainstream society? I mean, all of yours are, right?
Yeah, I think that may be a deeply American tradition. I've heard the argument made that it comes from the sort of pioneer spirit, and then the cowboy, the western, the sheriff, and the sort of the American individual, and he's always kind of a liminal figure on the borderline. It's not, there's a sense so much it has to be one person, and if he's a part of an institution, which is why you get Philip Marlowe, he used to work for the district attorney, but he was fired. There's this great tradition of detective novels where they've always been fired from something, and I think that they become heroic to us somehow because of of that. It's this or odd kind of battered heroism because they refuse to answer to the man, and that does seem to be core to it. It's much harder. Even someone like James Ellroy, where they are cops, they do work for the man. They're all they're all doing very bad things all the time within the system. So.
Yeah, Joe. I mean, what's Harry's problem with officials, right? He doesn't get on well with his bosses, does he?
No, it doesn't. So I'm probably somewhere in between that tradition of the lonely detective or the private eye and a man who is working within the system. Because Harry, he is in the system, and that is probably a tradition from the great Swedish writers who's sort of were the godparents of Scandinavian crime. Sjöwall and Wahlöö, who wrote in the 70s,
Right.
and wrote police procedurals. So it's a little bit of that, and a little bit the Lone Ranger, the outsider, that is still a believer in the system and he works within the system, but he by now at this point in the series he probably feel more related to the criminals he's chasing than his colleagues at the police house in Oslo.
I mean, with Harry, it's not the system he's against; it's corruption or corrupt officials within the system, and he almost sees the criminals as purer, as less tainted than a corrupt policeman, because a corrupt policeman has abused the power he's been given. A criminal has just followed his criminal intent. Right? So, in that sense, is that why he's identifying?
So that is probably the heritage from James Ellroy. There's something rotten in the state of, in this case, Norway.
I mean, Megan, some of your not really detectives, but some of your people at the heart of the cases are not even anything to do with the police force. I mean, they're Hollywood film studio publicists
Right.
who end up having to cover something up, but then get fed up with that and try and turn it around. You've stepped completely away from policemen at all. Is that because it's just too hard to remember who's a lieutenant?
The
who's a
research is very
corporal and that sort of
complicated.
thing?
No, I've never written an actual procedural, though I do love them. But I think frequently my main characters are women, and these are set in the mid-century, so they wouldn't be a part. They're forced to be sort of outlaws or mavericks because there is no place for them in the power structure. So they're not really necessarily rebels. No one wants to give them power or use so that they're already on the outside by courtesy of their sex. So that I think that sort of sets up this great opportunity for them to be outsiders from the beginning, and why would you want in? No one wants you in.
Yeah. To change it slightly, I mean, one of my things about crime novels, and I read them by the yard, right, is 5 minutes after I finished a crime novel, I don't really remember who did it and why they did it, right? And if you asked me anything like that, I'd be hopeless. What I do remember, of course, is characters and locations, right? People that do those very, very strong geographic locations where I can center myself. I don't have to know the place. In fact, it's often better if I don't know the place. And those very strong characters. I mean, you're not an LA girl, right? But
No.
you've set all of your books in Los Angeles. What is it about Los Angeles for you?
I do think it's the movies. It was sort of my fantasy play. My Los Angeles is really a fantasy It's movie Los Angeles more so, and a little bit Elroy Los Angeles because he's such an influence. But it's a really sort of fantastical place, and those movies so evoked. When you go to Los Angeles, if you see Sunset Boulevard, and you feel like you're in a dream because you know these locations so well, and there's something sort of very haunting about that. And there's it's so rich with atmosphere to begin with. It's also, for an American, Los Angeles is sort of the end. It's the end of the country. It's the end of the frontier. It's the sort of dropping off point. So there's something very, I think, noir about that. You can go no further. If you haven't found the pot of gold by now, it's not there. You're going into the Pacific Ocean. So there's something about that.
I mean, I tend to think, maybe it's because I'm a European, but I tend to think that American cities lend themselves to that hyper-realization. There can be a little bit more neon, the suits can be a little smarter, everyone can be a little slicker, the cars can be a little bigger and everything than real life. I mean, Joe, in Northern Europe particularly, are we hyper-realizing Oslo? Is that a bit more tricky, do you think?
I think that it's probably the same with Harry's Oslo as it is with your Los Angeles, that it's not really Oslo. It's always 95% it's Oslo the way it is, but it's sort of a Gotham City version of Oslo. It's a little bit darker, a little bit bigger, but I think it's interesting what you said, that 5 minutes after you read a crime novel, you don't, you can't remember who did it and why, and that is about character. And I absolutely agree that most crime novels, they are, the crime is probably just an excuse to write about the human being that is your main character in the book. And I think that in the Harry Hole series, I've realized over the years that it's not a series about crime. It's a series about Harry Hole.
Yeah.
And the moral choices that he has to make, and it's not even whether he's going to solve the case or whether he's going to survive physically, but it's probably about whether his eternal soul is going to be saved. And which leads me to, since we're talking about movies and hard-boiled crime fiction, the movie Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel, which is, I think it's just the essence of what crime writing is about. It's about whether you, in the end, is going to make that one good decision that will save your soul.
Yeah. I mean, Los Angeles, we know Los Angeles, right? Everyone knows Los Angeles. We've seen it so many times, we've seen it so many ways. I don't think Los Angeles cares how it's represented anymore because there's so many representations. But Joe, Harry Hole is now the most famous Norwegian in the world, isn't he? Right? I mean, our image of Oslo, if we have one from many people, is your image of Oslo. Do you don't feel any burden about that? Has anyone? What do the people of Oslo think of these books?
I think the people of Oslo is okay with it, but no, I agree. It's not like it's a tourist advertising for the city of Oslo. But it is, Oslo used to be this innocent village almost back 20 years ago. Although the drug scene in Oslo was always rather bad. Heroin was introduced in the 70s, and Oslo had the highest number of deaths from overdoses, only compared to Amsterdam. But the last 10-15 years you have had international crime coming to Oslo. Oslo and Norway has sort of opened up to the rest of Europe for good and bad, mostly good I think, but now you have human trafficking, you have prostitution, and the drug scene is worse than ever in many ways. So Oslo is a changed city, but these are the dark sides in Oslo. It's to most people who come to Oslo, they will probably, see it as a nice, peaceful place, and it is a safe place. But if you go downtown in Oslo after dark, it's another story.
Are you working out a little bit of that? We always talk about the American dream and things like that, but are you working out a little bit of the sort of reaction in the harsh light of day to the Scandinavian dream? I mean, it seems to me that a lot of Scandinavian writers are doing that there's been this image of Scandinavia that was believed around the world by a lot of people and believed by a lot of Scandinavians. And in recent years, with the rise of drugs, immigration, the globalized economy and everything, maybe there's a few cracks in the system there, and we're sort of seeing that in the writing coming out of there now.
Well, I still think it is, for people who travel a lot, they like me. I traveled ever since I was, I spent all my money ever since I was 18 years old to travel. You do realize that, the myth of the happy Scandinavian social democrat society, it's actually not a myth. It's true. I mean, it is actually one of the best places to live in the world. I just read that Norway was the best country to live in the world. Number 2 was actually Australia, and there was someone in an.
Should we take a vote on that?
Yeah, well.
Take a vote on that? The Norwegians will be.
There
with
was
you.
a comment in the Australian newspaper saying that how can that be? They have plus 10 in summer and minus 10 in winter, which is true. But so I don't think it's a myth, but there's a tradition for using the crime novel to criticize society and to deal with social problems. That's a tradition that stems back to the 70s, like I mentioned, Sjøvall and Bale, and they were left-wing writers, but more important, they were really good writers, and they took the crime novel from the kiosks and into the serious bookstores. So they made they made it okay for young talented writers to use the crime novel as a vehicle for their storytelling talents, and many of them would use the crime novel to express their political views. And there's a tradition for that in Scandinavia that I don't think you have in other countries, and that may be why it may seem to readers like the Scandinavian societies, have big problems, and of course there's problems. There's problems everywhere. But I still think that compared to most countries, Scandinavia is still this innocent, happy valley. Even in spite of what you may have read and heard happen in Oslo this summer,
Sure.
Where we had this massacre at Utøya. Even if the Prime Minister of Sweden, Olof Palme, was shot and the crime was never solved, it still is this happy valley, I think.
No. Megan, your books, the noir tradition, it does challenge the conventional American dream. I mean, how do you see that? How do you see the representation of the nation at large in noir?
It's funny. My first book is a nonfiction book where I studied the early noir and the sort of derivation, and that was you could see it was very much a part of it. You could see that it's constantly, rather than perhaps a critique of social conditions, a critique of the idea of America, and that success is yours if you work hard and you pull yourself from your bootstraps, and that the noir very, very sort of decimates that notion. When I write, though, that part of my head doesn't exactly click in. I tend to write from character and not sort of think what might I be saying about the American dream, which I think would be a fatal error, which is different than sort of seeing social conditions and representing them in a book. But the big concept of American dream, you seem like you're getting yourself into trouble if you say, in this book, I'm going to explain the problem with the American dream. So I do kind of resist that and try, as you say, to go from character and, as you say, outward.
But your characters, like, as is true of the noir tradition from Hammett and Chandler, Los Angeles, California, the noir book, it's all about people reinventing themselves,
right,
successfully or unsuccessfully,
right,
bringing themselves, the Okies going west, immigrants going into the city, poor people pretending to be rich, idiot sons that aren't going to inherit, bumping off the other son.
Yes.
There's always that attempt to try and get inherited wealth,
yes,
not to have to work for money. I mean, you've stuck very much with that, and Los Angeles is still very much a city like that.
Absolutely, because you have Hollywood, so it's a tradition of masks, of artifice. It's a dream factory. There's very much a sense that this is not actually a real place, and you can, and all the movie stars, we know that John Wayne's was born Francis, his name's Marion, so Marion, that's right. So that's definitely a part of it, and there also, I think crime fiction so depends on the notion of the hustler or the swindler, and California was a place you could do that. There was sort of if you've seen Chinatown, it's the perfect example. But somebody, with some wiles who paid off the right people could essentially start to own the city, and I think that's sort of the Wild West part of California that still persists. That the laws of other places, the more civilized East, and it gets wilder and wilder the further west you go. So I think that's definitely part of it too.
I mean, I think with Megan's characters, we never quite know who they are, right? I mean, we never quite know if they're really good girls gone bad or bad girls trying to go good, or what they are. They're usually
it's my problem too.
That's something you're clearly working out. With Harry, of course, we get a great backstory. I mean, I was looking on your website to try and get the order of the books right, and there's Harry. I mean, we have Harry, born 1963. Home Oslo, height 6'2", weight 15 stone, close-shaven blonde hair, blue eyes, pale complexion, athletic build, a law degree, and then Oslo Police College, and on and on. The whole backstory is there. I mean, he must be a really fully fleshed figure. Is there anything you don't know about Harry, except perhaps what he's going to do next?
Well, I do know what he's going to do next. But he has probably developed over the years. I didn't know that he was born in 1963, by the way. But
It's on your website.
yeah, probably somebody has done their maths. But he wasn't. I actually wrote the first novel about Harry when I was here in Australia for the first time. I was sitting in King's Cross. My plan was to really explore Australia, but I spent most of the time just in that hotel room in King's Cross, running in and out to get meals and then writing. And he wasn't a fully developed character until my third novel, The Redbreast, which was the first one that was published here. So it has taken time to get to know him. And when I wrote the first book, I didn't know it was going to be a series. I mean, I didn't know it was going to get published at all. So I didn't really think of him, as the main character, and that he would be at the core of my stories. I thought at that time that crime novels was about crimes and crimes being solved. So I saw him more as the reader's camera lens into the story, before I later on realized that he's actually what I'm and who I'm writing about. So I sort of gotten to know him bit by bit, and he's the kind of bloke that he's too intense and he's too dark to stay with for a long time, so I have to take breaks.
Do you like him? I mean, would you like to have a drink with him?
I like him. I like to spend 3 hours with him and then leave.
Although I never remember who did it, I am interested in the crimes that are committed, because I think, and that's where you two guys become very, very different. I mean, Megan, I always sort of think with noir that the crimes that they do were a little bit like the product of economics. I don't know if you've ever read George Orwell's The Decline of the English Murder.
Yes.
That in the 30s, when it was very difficult for women to ever get a divorce, and if they could get a divorce, it was a slur, and they never got the money. There were, surprisingly enough, a lot of men poisoned in those days. Right? And then the divorce laws came in, and we don't really see men getting poisoned very much now, or women have got better at it. I know. But the noir style, that West Coast LA noir style, seemed to me to always be about a sort of a stage of capitalism where there was a lot of money in the system, but people didn't want to inherit it. In that way, it was a sort of move on from Agatha. It was like Agatha Christie, but with more guns and better cars. It was because Agatha Christie was always about bumping off the oldest brother so that the second brother could inherit, or something like that, or removing a wife so you didn't have to split the inheritance. And there's a lot of that. I'm thinking of films like, or just tricks to get unearned income because there was so much money around. That kind of Double Indemnity, which is a great noir film. Where it's just it's a scam on an insurance policy, right? I mean, when you're writing to style, do you have to think about what sort of crimes people would have done in those days?
I actually kind of think it's the opposite. Double Indemnity is a slight exception, but because so many of them came out of a depression, I think there is this sense of actually there is no money to be had, and it's especially anxiety among the male protagonists because they can't be the breadwinner, and I think that's very strong. And then the sort of couple that plan the murder of the husband to get, that's always part of it too. But I think there's this sense of economic terror in those 30s novels. In the 40s, though, I do think what you say is exactly right, because there's this boom coming out of World War II, this boom time, and I think there you see it a lot more.
A lot of easy money.
Yeah, exactly. And why isn't it mine? I think there's all those great noir that are these returning vets, like the Mickey Spillane tradition, where why have I come back? I fought for my country. I was over there 4 years. I killed a bunch of people, and why don't I have this great job? Or what was my girlfriend up to while I was gone? There's this lot of sense of what happened to me, and I do think that that's quite true. There's this sense that why don't I have the refrigerator? That sort of feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know why refrigerator came into my mind, but you get the idea.
Because you had refrigerators a long time before most of us. We weren't really jealous of something we'd never had. Joe, I mean, I know yesterday you talked a little bit about the nature of evil and what drives people. So we don't need to. But your the crime in yours, the violence is quite high. It's motivated by something different. People aren't doing it to profit in a financial sense or whatever. You know, I mean, when you looked at that, why have you chosen those kind of crimes? What is it about the kind of killing and the kind of atrocities that these people commit that attracted you?
Well, I think that first of all, I think that money as a motive for murder in Scandinavia, it's almost impossible. I mean, it's so I think that that probably you have to go back to the Second World War to do. I mean, in the 1920s, Norway was actually one of the poorest countries in Europe, only compared to Greece, Ireland, and Greece. And then you had crime novels, you know, where the murderer did it for money. But nowadays you can hardly find a crime book with a motive like that. So it has to do with human nature, and you know, the famous Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen. His stories were almost like built up like crime stories. It was always about, you know, really strong emotions that had been concealed for years, and secrets in the family that throughout the play gradually is being revealed. So it's actually, you know, crime stories, not necessarily with a crime, but it's the same structure. And I think that if you look at Scandinavian crime and also my stories, they are all about strong feelings, emotions that have been concealed, and the truth gradually coming to the surface.
I think that's probably true with the money too. The money's the excuse, you know. Really, it's the sense of why do I not have what I want, or why can't I get that,
I
or
deserve
sometimes,
it.
or I want the woman. I need the money to get the woman. So I think you're so right. About the sort of Bad Lieutenant example. This is so much about the soul, you know, the crime novels. I think there's sort of the soul laid bare, these sort of really basic emotions that go out of control. You know.
And we're all having this debate at the moment in developed Western societies about sense of entitlement. I'm entitled to be a star. I'm entitled to be rich. I'm entitled to be famous. And if I can't get it, I want to get it some way. I'm going to ask Joe one more question that I've always wanted to ask him, and then we're going to move to some questions. I believe there's a microphone somewhere moving around up and down the middles. You'll have to put your hand up for it when we get into that. And I think there's going to be a lot, so we'll keep them quick. Joe, I just wanted to ask you, though, on Harry, because I know there's a lot of Harry fans here. Do you think his susceptibility to drink and going off the rails and that is what makes him a good detective? Or do you think it's the detective work he does and the horror he sees that drives him to the drink and that, which is chicken and egg, right? Which comes first?
I don't think drinking makes him a better detective, but I think it makes him a better hero in fiction. Because I think that, you know, a hero has to have an Achilles heel. If not, it's a really boring hero. I mean, Superman without kryptonite, how boring would that be? I mean, it's boring with the kryptonite, so how would it be without?
Good. I'm not a superhero person either. I think it's a stupid genre. I'm not sure. The microphone is there somewhere. I think the way that it works here is that if you want to go to the microphone.
Thank you for a very fascinating discussion. I've really appreciated that. I'm just, this is a question not really about your writing per se, but with such an involvement in crime, are there any risks involved in writing crime from the actual criminal world itself, you know, because of your reputation around writing crime?
They'd have to come back from the grave, really, wouldn't they?
I have occasionally, several of my books are based on real life cases, and I haven't had any criminal threat, but I have had some legal issues where I've learned now not to use real names, which someone should have told me that before, right? But I have, and it was very illuminating because at a certain point, and I know you probably dealing with this right now too, Paul. There's a sense when you're basing it on a real life case, at a certain point you move moved it so far from the real life case, you've forgotten that these are real people that you are writing about who may have children and grandchildren who don't really want to see their mother represented in this fashion, So there is this sense of sometimes you can forget the sort of the meat of the matter, and that's it's good to be reminded of that.
Well, I had in one of my latest novels, I was writing about the bikers club in Oslo, using the real name of the club and their location, and so I was advised by someone in the police who works with organized crime that I should really not use their name, and I asked him, "What do you mean? What would happen? Would they come get me and kill me?" And he said, "Yes."
Okay.
And so you know what? I changed the name. But sometimes it's the other way around. I was at the prison reading to the prisoners, and I at the time I was doing research on bank robberies, and at the end of the session, I told them that I'm doing research on bank robbing. Is there anybody here that can help me? And they were, all the hands were in the air. Ask me. And finally, I found a guy who knew quite a lot about bank robbing, and he told me about his own jobs and his own robberies. And at the end, I asked him, so what do you want in return? Do you want? I can give you free copies of my books, or and he said, just make sure you spell my name right in your book.
Sir, I think you're standing.
A short question for Joe. Are there any plans or offers to make any films on Harry?
Well, I turned down the offers for the Harry Holt series for many years because I was still writing the series, and I was afraid that if you had one actor sort of defining who Harry was, that would destroy all the Harry Holts in the heads of my readers. And I was asked a lot about film rights for many years, and I would always give this answer, but then add at the end that, but if Martin Scorsese calls, I might reconsider. What happened was that a British production company, Working Title, called 2 years ago, and they had probably heard that I had turned down offers, but they had probably also heard that I was a big fan of the Coen brothers. So they had a great opening line. They said, "Hi, we're Working Title, and we made Fargo." And so I said, "I'm listening." And they said, "What would it take for you to change your mind and give us the rights for the Snowman?" And I said that, well, then I would have to decide who is going to direct it. And they said, "Sorry, Joe, it doesn't work that way. This is Hollywood. We can't give your book to, let's say, Martin Scorsese and have him read it and then tell him that if you read the book and you really like it and you want to make it into a movie, then maybe this writer up in Norway somewhere will say yes." And I said, "No, I understand. I completely understand that. I understand I'm sort of turning your offer down, but you asked me what it would take." And so I didn't hear from them for 6 months. Then they called back and said, "Okay, let's do it that way. Send us your list of directors." So I sent them a list of 5 directors, and then I reduced it to 4 directors. And 6 months ago, they called me and said that, "Okay, your number one is going to do it, so now Martin Scorsese is going to direct The Snowman."
Megan, your great book Queenpin, which has 2 amazing female characters, one who's been in the crime business for years, but is still sexy and leggy and everything. And she sort of takes on as an intern or an apprentice, a sexy younger girl to train her. I mean, you've been, can you talk? You've been floating around TV with that, right?
Yeah, that it has an option for TV series now, and I have never thought a TV series would work for any of my books because they're so, the endings are. Things fall apart pretty badly at the ending, but they have the idea to turn it into a TV series. Though I was telling Paul this in the book, the older woman is supposed to be in her 50s, and now the actresses they're considering casting are at least 5 years younger than me. So I don't know how young the younger woman's going to be, but it'll be interesting. Sort of going through the Hollywood. I should have been firmer, but I just away.
I swear to you, just give him a list of 5 directors.
I didn't do it. Next time I'm doing the list.
If anyone has any questions, I'm afraid you have to sort of make your way over to the microphone.
For Megan, an American friend said to me some years ago that if you turned America on its side and shook it, then everything loose falls into Los Angeles. Yeah. Can you give me any ideas of any real-life loose people that might have made their way into your novels?
Oh, yes. Well, let's see. It depends on how much you know Los Angeles lore, but there's a missing starlet case that I used for one of my books. It's sort of the classic, sort of like Black Dahlia. There's so many missing murdered starlet cases in Hollywood, and that was one of them. And my book Bury Me Deep is based on a case that's fairly well known among true crime buffs in the States, which is she's called the Trunk Murderess. This is a woman who had a fight with 2 female friends and ended up murdering them and stuffing their bodies in a steamer trunk, which she then shipped to Los Angeles. And this was before, I guess, any kind of rules about what you could ship in a steamer trunk, because they made it to Los Angeles and no one said anything, even though it started to smell and everything. It's very different in the book and not as gory as that sounds. But Los Angeles is famous, much like Adelaide, from what I've been hearing, for very unusual.
Oh, you're really making yourself popular now. Those book sales are going to go through the roof now. Joe. Has any member of the Oslo police force jumped up and said, "I'm Harry Hole"? Either that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. Has anyone sort of thought it was them?
There was actually one guy that I'd used as an informant, and he called me. He had a divorce and he started drinking, and one night he called me and said, hi Joe, I'm turning into Harry Hole. and I said, okay, are you sure? Are you drinking enough? And I said, I don't know, but I'm trying. I'm really trying.
That's great. What a role model for the police force. Yeah, wonderful. Please.
So writing must change you, and I can imagine writing crime is a bit different to writing romance. And I had this word of, does it corrupt? For both of you, has, writing crime put you on the edge?
It's corrupted you. You don't look corrupted, Megan. Joe, maybe a little.
It's almost, I do think for many crime writers that I've known, it's almost like, thank God they're writing crime novels, because they sort of get out a lot of the darkness through the writing, and therefore they can lead rather sunny, genial lives. And I found it a bit that way. It's a different headspace when I write. It bears no relation to my actual life. I think that's why my first 4 books were all set in the past too, that they would be so separate, so that I could feel separate from them. So if they were corrupting, I was already corrupted to start, I suppose.
Jazz, has it taken a toll on you, Harry Hole?
Yeah, well, sort of, but I don't know how to answer that question. It's we were just talking about it last night. We were talking about the American president election. And I realized that, if I run for president, I'd probably be out of the race in 2 days. But then again, because there's too much in my past that you could use against me. So but then again, I like to keep that secret.
But also, I mean, your books are very, very intense. And we were talking before, and you sort of said, well, what are you doing afterwards? And I think me and Megan were like, we'll get a beer or something. You said, no, I'm going off to climb a mountain or something. Now, this may be something that all Norwegian boys do. I don't know. But are you, I mean, is the intensity of the writing, do you really need to get away from it sometimes and take a break from it?
Yeah, well, rock climbing is something that, it'll... when we're writing, I guess the same with you, Megan, that we have to use our fears as sort of a fuel in the stories, and most of the time I have to go back to my childhood I was a scared child, so I had to go back and sort of dig into that and come back and use it as fuel. But I have a fear of heights, so I started rock climbing just to face those fears and to be able to have a place where I can go and really get scared again. So I guess now that's fuel for my novels also. So rock climbing is I don't know if it's typical Norwegian, but I think it's actually typical Australian. I went to the Blue Mountains, lots of beautiful rocks there, and now I'm going to the conservation park. I hear you have some beautiful climbing up there. So I'm going there just after the signing.
I mean, Harry gets to travel quite a bit in odd ways. I mean, I was just telling you that, I flew here from Hong Kong, and the opening of your book, which is it, the Snowman or the Leopard, I forget which one, starts with Leopard, right? Starts with Harry holed up in the famous Chungking mansions in Kowloon and sort of owing an awful lot of money to the Chinese triads, which is not a good place to be, and drinking himself silly. I mean, he gets around a little bit, right? He travels. I mean, most cops in the tradition that you write in, I mean, like Rebus never goes outside Edinburgh, right? He doesn't even go to London or anywhere. I mean, they don't go beyond the sort of square mile, right, of their sort of patch. I mean, you travel a lot, so is that why Harry travels a lot, or?
Yeah, maybe. But I think it's also like you mentioned when we started that in this genre, crime genre, there's always a strong sense of time and place, and I think that Oslo is sort of my Sin City, which was interesting when I saw the movie. That when they were driving out of Sin City, it was like a video game, that there were no map outside Sin City. It was just blank spaces, and to a degree Oslo is like that in my books. There's only Oslo. There is either you're in Oslo or you're outside Oslo, so you might as well go to Hong Kong or Congo or South America, which Harry does, instead of going to Sweden. It's so I send him when he's outside Oslo. He's like really, really far away from Oslo.
Yeah. Lady there, please.
Can you speak to about some of the writers and some of the books that have inspired your craft development?
Yes, good. Come on, reading lists. Reading lists. Everyone wants reading lists.
Some of the classic hard-boiled masters, like Raymond Chandler and Thompson, David Goodis. I don't know if you are a David Goodis fan as well. They were influences, and James Ellroy certainly in the last. I remember reading Black Dahlia when I was 13, and it broke the world open for me. It was so sordid and dirty, and I couldn't believe that I was getting to read it, and it sort of had this lingering influence on me ever since. So those were the ones I read. And now I read a lot of contemporary crime fiction. I love Kate Atkinson. I love tart noir, even though I guess it's fading according to Paul.
Well, the Scandinavians.
I know.
Vikings are back. Look, do you read outside of the crime genre? Is there stuff that makes you think in terms of style and things outside of that?
Yeah, I do read a lot of nonfiction. As I'm sort of a research junkie, one of the reasons I think I set things in the past a lot or use real life cases. So I do read I'm one of those biography people. I love the big, thick Cleopatra, and I'm inspired by them as well.
Joe, what do you read?
Not so much crime fiction. Like I mentioned, Jim Thompson is my all-time favorite. I just started rereading Ernest Hemingway, and I'm happy to say he's just as good as I remembered him, or even better. I just read I don't know what it's called in English, The Snow of Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, same.
Great,
Snows of Kilimanjaro.
great short
yeah.
story, just beautiful. And
It's that mountain thing again.
yes, and Charles Bukowski is a favorite of mine. I mentioned Henry Gibson. Knut Hamsun is the Nobel Prize winner. He's probably the best Norwegian writer ever. Just wrote beautiful prose. I tend not to read my colleagues too much. It's I read perhaps one book now and then just to sort of find out what's going on. But it's like, everything is written, and when I come up with an idea for a novel, I like to think that I'm the first person in the world who has come up with the idea. I'd rather not know that, okay, there's been 3 books written with this plot, more or less. Yeah.
It's actually it was done by the Greeks, basically.
Yeah, that
it wasn't
too,
them, it
that
was the
too.
Romans. And
Yeah.
fine. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left, so 1 minute each or something. What are you doing now, Megan? What are you working on?
Well, it'll sound crazy, but I'm working on a novel. It's a crime novel. It's set. I don't know if you're familiar with American Cheerleaders. It's set in a cheerleading squad, but it's a rather dark tale. And my inspiration is sort of a Fight Club on a cheerleading squad. Might be how I think of it. So that's. It sounds
I'd
crazy
send
when
that
I
to
say
Scorsese.
it.
I can't see how Scorsese
That's
wouldn't
right.
want to
I'm
do
going
that.
after Scorsese after he's done with you.
So what do you do? More Harry?
Yeah, well, right now I'm writing a children's book. I have a children's book series, Dr. Proctor.
That's less violent, I'd say. Slightly
Yeah,
less
well,
violent.
it's a little bit of crime in this. Right now we have this small little guy who is the hero in the books. He's trying to convince some bank robbers that the money he has stolen for them are money from Monopoly, and he is trying to convince them that it's actual money, that there's a small country in the Pacific called Monopolia. And that you can see the watermarks in the money, that is real money. But they are telling him that we can see any watermark. Well, that's because it's water.
Yeah. Can't see it. I mean, people want to know, though, there is going to be more Harry. Harry's carrying on, drinking, solving crimes, seeing the dark side.
You have to read Phantom first.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
You'll keep it rolling. Excellent. Well, I brought them on individually, so I'll send them off individually. Please, a round of applause for Megan Abbott, please. She's absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much as well to Joe Nesbo. Thank you very much. And that's that.